My name is Megan Foster, and today is my 32nd birthday. I should be enjoying this elegant dinner at Elysium, surrounded by my closest family members. Instead, I'm fighting to maintain my composure as Craig, my ex-boyfriend of 6 years, sits across from me, smirking. My brother James invited him without warning me. Craig just called my career aspirations cute little dreams with that condescending tone I remember all too well. If he only knew what I've accomplished since we broke up. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, hit that subscribe button, and stay for a story about the sweetest revenge served on a silver platter. 6 years ago, my life looked completely different. I was dating Craig Hamilton, a successful investment banker who never let me forget how fortunate I was to have him. We met at a friend's engagement party where he charmed me with stories of his travels and ambitions. Within 3 months, we were officially a couple, and I was blinded by what I thought was love. Craig worked at Lancaster Financial, one of Boston's top firms. He managed portfolios for wealthy clients and brought home a 6-figure salary that he flaunted at every opportunity. Designer suits, an expensive downtown apartment, and a BMW were his status symbols. I admired his drive initially, thinking I'd found someone who valued ambition as much as I did. At the time, I was working as a marketing coordinator for a small tech company, but I had bigger dreams. Every night, I'd work on business plans for my app idea, a platform that would revolutionize how small businesses connect with freelancers. I called it ConnectPro, and I believed in it with my whole heart. When I first told Craig about ConnectPro, he patted my hand and said, "That's cute, babe. But the tech world is brutal. Maybe stick to something more realistic for someone with your experience." That should have been my first warning, but instead, I tried harder to make him believe in me. As our relationship progressed, a pattern emerged. Craig controlled our finances, insisting on paying for everything but making me feel indebted. "I make 3 times what you do, it only makes sense," he'd say, before deciding which restaurants were worth visiting or which vacations were practical. When I suggested more affordable alternatives so I could contribute, he'd laugh and say, "I forget sometimes that not everyone can afford the finer things." The control extended beyond money. He'd critique my clothing choices, suggesting I dress more professionally if I wanted to be taken seriously. He'd interrupt me when I spoke about my ideas at social gatherings, explaining what I really meant to our friends. Each time, I'd shrink a little more, questioning my own worth and capabilities. The breaking point came during a dinner with his colleagues. I'd been invited as Craig's girlfriend, and the conversation turned to entrepreneurship. Feeling confident after receiving positive feedback on my business plan from a former professor, I joined the discussion. "I'm actually working on an app that connects small businesses with freelancers based on specific project needs and budget constraints," I said when asked about my career goals. Craig laughed loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "Megan has these adorable startup dreams. I keep telling her the failure rate for new apps is astronomical, especially for non-coders. She's more of a creative type, really." The table fell awkwardly silent. Craig's boss, Jennifer, looked at me with pity, while others avoided eye contact. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I excused myself to the restroom and cried silently for 5 minutes before returning with a plastered-on smile. 2 weeks later, after Craig criticized my unrealistic 5-year plan during a dinner at home, I ended our relationship. He was genuinely shocked, as if he couldn't fathom why his guidance wasn't appreciated. "You're making a mistake," he said, gathering his things from my apartment. "You'll never amount to anything significant without someone to ground you in reality. Good luck with your little app pipe dream." After the breakup, I spiraled into depression. Craig's words echoed in my head daily, amplifying my self-doubt. For 2 months, I barely worked on ConnectPro, convinced he was right about my capabilities. I lost weight, slept poorly, and avoided friends who might ask about my progress. The turning point came unexpectedly. While cleaning my apartment, I found notes from a business seminar I'd attended before meeting Craig. One line stood out: "Your harshest critics have the most to fear from your success." Something clicked. What if Craig's discouragement came from his own insecurity? Slowly, I rebuilt my confidence. I joined a female entrepreneur support group and reconnected with my mentor from college. I revisited my business plan with fresh eyes and identified weaknesses Craig had never specifically pointed out. I took coding classes at night to understand the technical aspects better. 6 months after our breakup, I pitched ConnectPro to a small group of angel investors. They rejected me, citing concerns about market saturation. Rather than giving up, I refined my concept, focusing on an underserved niche of creative industry freelancers. I lived frugally, saved aggressively from my day job, and invested my own $15,000 to develop a minimal viable product. A year of persistence, countless pitch rejections, and late nights coding alongside a freelance developer I'd hired finally led to my breakthrough. Samantha Wright, a venture capitalist known for backing female entrepreneurs, saw potential in ConnectPro. Her firm invested $500,000 for a 15% stake, valuing my company at over $3 million on potential alone. That was 5 years ago. As I pulled up to Elysium for my birthday dinner tonight, I had no idea Craig would be there. I certainly never expected to relive the belittlement I'd worked so hard to overcome. My family knew about my success but respected my desire to live modestly and keep my achievements private. I never flaunted my wealth or status, preferring to let my work speak for itself. When I spotted Craig sitting at our reserved table, my stomach dropped. Some wounds, it seems, never fully heal. I froze at the entrance of Elysium, momentarily considering whether I could invent an emergency and reschedule my birthday dinner. The maitre d' smiled expectantly, waiting for me to follow him to the table where my family, and Craig, were already seated. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my simple black dress and nodded for him to lead the way. The restaurant exuded elegant sophistication with its crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Any other night, I would have appreciated the soft jazz playing in the background and the delicate aroma of truffle and herbs wafting from the kitchen. Tonight, however, my senses were overwhelmed by anxiety. There she is. The birthday girl. My mother, Eleanor, stood up to embrace me. At 64, she remained striking with her silver-streaked dark hair and warm brown eyes that matched my own. She whispered in my ear, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. James didn't tell me until we arrived." My brother James, 2 years my senior, approached next with an apologetic smile. His wife Rachel gave me a sympathetic look from her seat, one hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly. "Meg, happy birthday," James said, hugging me tightly before whispering, "I should have warned you. We're working on the Westlake project together. I didn't think it would be a big deal." Before I could respond, Craig stood up, drawing himself to his full 6'2" height. He wore a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, with a flashy silver watch peeking from his sleeve. His sandy blonde hair was styled perfectly, and his smile held the same overconfident charm that had once attracted me. Well, Megan Foster. The birthday girl herself," he said, his voice carrying that familiar note of condescension disguised as warmth. "You look nice. Very appropriate for your age." I forced a smile. "Craig. What a surprise. James and I have been working closely on the Westlake development. When he mentioned your birthday dinner, I thought it would be nice to catch up." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Apparently, you've been busy these past few years." I took my seat, acutely aware of the tension around the table. My mother quickly jumped in with a conversation about the restaurant's renowned chef, but Craig soon dominated the discussion. "I was just telling your family about my promotion to senior investment director," he announced, swirling his glass of expensive bourbon. "The company sent me to London and Paris twice this year already. The European market is where the real opportunities are right now." "That sounds fascinating," Rachel said politely, though I caught her subtle eye roll when Craig looked away. "It is," Craig continued. "The caliber of clients I'm handling now is exceptional. In fact, I just closed a deal with a tech startup that went public last month. Their valuation hit $300 million. He turned his attention directly to me. Speaking of tech, whatever happened to that little app idea you had, Megan? Connect something, was it? The deliberate way he pretended to forget the name stung, but I kept my expression neutral. ConnectPro. Right. Did you ever get that off the ground? I remember you being quite passionate about it, despite the... He paused meaningfully, challenges. James jumped in. Megan's been doing really well actually. I've been busy, I interrupted, not ready for Craig to know the extent of my success. The idea evolved over time. Craig nodded with exaggerated understanding. That's the smart approach. Most first-time entrepreneurs don't realize their initial concept is rarely viable. It's good you didn't sink too much time into it before recognizing that. My mother's hand tightened around her water glass. She knew exactly how successful ConnectPro had become. So what are you doing these days? Craig pressed. Still in marketing? I work in tech, I said vaguely. Project development. Entry-level tech jobs can be a great learning experience, Craig said with a patronizing smile. The industry needs support staff as much as it needs innovators. James coughed uncomfortably as the waiter arrived with our appetizers. I stared at my tuna tartare, my appetite rapidly disappearing. Megan has always been creative, Craig continued, addressing my family as if I wasn't present. Remember that marketing campaign she wanted to pitch to her old company? The one with the animated mascot? He was referring to a concept I'd developed that my former employer had rejected. After our breakup, I'd refined the idea and sold it to a competing firm where it became their most successful campaign to date. I remember thinking it was a bit juvenile for a professional services company, but Megan was so convinced it would work. He chuckled. Sometimes enthusiasm outpaces experience, you know? The food here is exceptional, I said, desperately trying to change the subject. Have you tried the scallops, Craig? They're supposedly the chef's specialty. I prefer the wagyu, he replied dismissively. I developed a taste for it in Tokyo last year. Some things are worth the extra expense, if you can afford them. His gaze flicked to my simple gold hoop earrings and the absence of designer labels on my clothing. I'd deliberately chosen understated attire tonight, as I did most days. My success had taught me that true confidence doesn't need external validation. Speaking of expenses, Craig continued, I just closed on a penthouse in the Millennium Tower. The views are spectacular. Are you still in that little apartment in Somerville, Megan? I've moved, I said simply. Hopefully to a better neighborhood. Craig laughed. I remember how you used to talk about wanting a house with a garden someday. Real estate in Boston is brutal though. Sometimes we need to adjust our expectations to reality. The waiter returned to take our main course orders, providing momentary relief from Craig's commentary. Once he left, my brother attempted to steer the conversation toward neutral territory. So Mom was telling us about her gardening club's exhibition next month, James began. Before I forget, Craig interrupted, turning to me. My firm is actually looking for someone in digital marketing. Nothing senior level, but it could be a foot in the door at a prestigious company. I'd be happy to put in a word, if you're interested in leaving the tech support world. The assumption that I needed his help to advance my career was almost laughable. ConnectPro now employed over 80 people, including a marketing department of 15 talented professionals. That's thoughtful, I managed, but I'm content where I am. Content is fine, Craig said with a dismissive wave, but you always talked about bigger aspirations. Sometimes we need to admit when our dreams need scaling back. There's no shame in accepting realistic limitations. The conversation continued in this vein through the main course. Craig regaled us with stories of his important clients, luxury vacations, and career triumphs. Each anecdote seemed carefully selected to highlight the contrast between his success and what he perceived as my stagnation. As the waiter brought out my birthday cake, a delicate chocolate creation with a single candle, Craig raised his wine glass in a mock toast. To Megan, he said with that familiar smirk, who's at least succeeding at aging. 32 looks good on you, even if other aspirations haven't quite panned out. I felt heat rising to my cheeks as my family awkwardly joined the toast. Just as I was about to respond, my phone rang. Checking the screen, I saw it was Diane, my company's chief operations officer. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I need to take this." As I walked toward the restaurant's entrance, I heard Craig's voice behind me. "Work calls on your birthday? Must be really important tech support emergency." I stepped outside into the cool evening air, trying to calm my racing heart before answering the call. "Megan Foster speaking," I answered, grateful for the momentary escape from Craig's condescension. "Megan, I'm sorry to bother you on your birthday," Diane said, her voice tense. "We've got a situation with the Singapore launch. The localization team found critical errors in the API documentation that could delay the rollout." I shifted into CEO mode immediately. "What's the timeline looking like? Have you spoken with Marcus about implementing the fixes?" As Diane detailed the technical issues, I noticed Craig had followed me outside and was standing a few feet away, pretending to check his phone while obviously eavesdropping. "Let's move the launch by 48 hours, I decided. "Tell the team I'll approve the overtime budget, and I'll review the changes first thing tomorrow. Email me the documentation tonight." "Will do. Sorry again about your dinner." "Don't worry about it. That's why you get the big bucks," I joked, ending the call. Craig pocketed his phone with an amused expression. "Big bucks for tech support? Times have changed." "Just a work thing," I said vaguely, walking past him toward the restaurant entrance. "Sounded important," he pressed. "Project development must be more critical than I realized." "Or were you pretending to be more important than you are?" I stopped and turned to face him. "Why are you doing this, Craig?" "Doing what?" He had the audacity to look innocent. "The constant digs, the belittling comments. It's been 6 years. I would have thought you'd moved on." He stepped closer. "I'm just making conversation, Megan. If you're feeling inadequate, that's not my fault. I'm simply sharing my success, something friends do." "We're not friends." "No," he agreed, his voice hardening. "We're not. We could have been so much more if you'd listened to me. Instead, you threw away a relationship with real potential because you couldn't handle constructive criticism." I laughed incredulously. "Is that what you call it? You systematically tore down every idea and ambition I had." "I was trying to protect you from disappointment," he said, his tone patronizing again. "Look at you now, Megan. You're 32, wearing a dress from last season, taking emergency calls about tech support on your birthday. Meanwhile, I'm exactly where I said I'd be, at the top of my field, enjoying the finer things in life." Before I could respond, the restaurant door opened, and my mother appeared. "Everything okay out here? Your food is getting cold." "It's fine, Mom. Just a work call," I said, forcing a smile. Back at the table, Craig was quick to comment on my absence. "Crisis averted in the tech support world?" I simply nodded, cutting into my now lukewarm steak. "You know," Craig continued, addressing the table, "Megan always had trouble with work-life balance. Remember how she'd spend weekends working on that app idea instead of enjoying life?" He turned to my brother. "James, didn't you guys go sailing once, and she spent the whole day on her laptop?" "She was dedicated," James said defensively. "Nothing wrong with that. Dedication is admirable when it leads somewhere," Craig replied. "Otherwise, it's just wasted time." He took a deliberate sip of his wine before adding, "I've always believed in working smarter, not harder. That's why I can afford to take actual vacations now." I noticed my mother's knuckles whitening around her fork. "Speaking of vacations," Craig continued, "I just got back from Bali. 2 weeks at the Four Seasons. You'd love it there, Megan, though it might be a stretch on a project developer's salary." "I'm sure it was lovely," I managed. "It was. My suite had a private infinity pool overlooking the ocean." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. "Here, take a look at paradise." He passed his phone around the table, narrating each image of opulent luxury. That's the private beach. That's the helicopter tour I took of the volcanoes. Oh, and that's my ocean view suite. When the phone reached me, I glanced at the pictures without comment before passing it back. Not impressed? Craig asked with a smirk. It looks very nice, I said neutrally. The resort costs $3,000 per night, he added, as if I hadn't understood the exclusivity. Worth every penny, though. Life's too short to deny yourself luxury when you can afford it. He eyed my simple gold necklace, a gift from my mother on my 30th birthday. Some people have different priorities, I suppose. The waiter approached to clear our plates, asking if we were ready for dessert. The birthday girl might want to skip the extra calories, Craig commented with a pointed glance at my figure. But I'll take the chocolate souffle. My sister-in-law Rachel, normally the most diplomatic person at any gathering, finally spoke up. Megan looks fantastic. Some men actually appreciate women who don't obsess over every calorie. Craig laughed dismissively. Just looking out for an old friend. After 30, metabolism changes. I remember Megan always struggled with those last 10 pounds. I had never mentioned weight concerns to Craig. This was a complete fabrication designed to embarrass me. I'll have the creme brulee, I told the waiter, meeting Craig's gaze directly. As the waiter left, Craig steered the conversation back to his career achievements. The financial sector really rewards excellence. My year-end bonus alone was enough to buy the Porsche I've had my eye on. He turned to me with feigned concern. Do tech support jobs come with bonuses? Or are you still hoping for that big break with your app ideas? Before I could answer, his expression brightened with false realization. I just had a thought. My firm handles investments for several tech incubators. If you've refined that Connect thingy idea into something viable, I could make an introduction. His tone made it clear he believed no such refinement had occurred. They're always looking for fresh concepts, even if they need significant development from professional teams. That's very thoughtful, I said, my patience wearing dangerously thin. It's the least I can do. I know how the real world can crush youthful optimism. Sometimes people need a helping hand from those who've actually succeeded. The desserts arrived, momentarily pausing Craig's monologue. As we ate, he surveyed the restaurant with an appraising eye. Nice place, though I prefer Sorellina for Italian. Their wine list is superior. He glanced at the neighboring tables. The clientele here is more accessible. Sorellina attracts a more accomplished crowd. My phone buzzed with another message from Diane. The situation in Singapore was escalating, requiring decisions only I could make as CEO. Craig noticed my distraction. Another tech emergency? Must be serious if they're bothering you during dinner. It is, I admitted, the weight of my company's international launch pressing on me. Well, don't let us stop you, Craig said magnanimously. Some roles require constant availability. That's why they're entry-level. My mother had reached her limit. Craig, that's enough. Enough what, Mrs. Foster? I'm being supportive of Megan's career, whatever it may be. You're being condescending, she replied sharply. No, I'm being realistic, he countered. Someone needs to be. Megan always had her head in the clouds, dreaming of startup glory while lacking the business acumen to make it happen. He turned to me, his expression a mixture of pity and superiority. Look, not everyone is cut out for extraordinary success. There's no shame in an ordinary life. Tech support, project management, these are respectable jobs. They pay the bills, provide structure. I felt a strange calm settling over me as Craig continued his speech. Some people just aren't meant for success, he said, his eyes locked on mine. They lack that essential drive, that killer instinct. I recognized it in you years ago, Megan. That's why I tried to guide you toward realistic goals. As he spoke, something shifted inside me. The hurt and anger began to transform into something else, a clear, cool certainty. I had spent years proving Craig wrong through my actions. Perhaps it was time he knew exactly what I had accomplished. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I need to make one more call. As I walked away from the table, I heard Craig say to my family, "See what I mean? No boundaries between work and life. That's why she'll always be answering to someone else's emergencies instead of calling the shots." I stepped outside once more, making a quick call not to my office, but to my assistant. It was time to change the dynamic of this birthday dinner completely. Outside Elysium, the night air had cooled considerably. I pulled my light jacket closer as I dialed my assistant's number. The restaurant's valet attendant stood at a discreet distance, occasionally glancing my way with mild curiosity. "Jessica, it's me," I said when my assistant answered. "I need a favor that can't wait until tomorrow." "Anything for the birthday, boss," Jessica replied cheerfully. "Aren't you supposed to be at dinner?" "I am, but there's been an unexpected development." "Remember Craig Hamilton? The ex who said you'd never amount to anything? The one who inspired your prove them wrong speech at last year's women's business conference?" "That's the one. He's here at my birthday dinner, and he spent the entire evening implying I'm a failed, entry-level nobody." Jessica gasped. "Are you serious? Does he not know who you are now?" "No, and I've been vague about my success so far. But his condescension has reached unbearable levels. I need you to send Thomas with the McLaren to the restaurant in 30 minutes. Also, email me the latest company valuation report and the Forbes feature." "Absolutely. Do you want the Time magazine cover too?" I considered this. "Yes, send everything. Oh, and call Robert at Elysium. Tell him I'm ready for protocol celebration now instead of after dinner." "Consider it done." "And Megan?" "Make him eat his words." "That's exactly what I intend to do." I ended the call and took a deep breath, preparing myself for what would come next. Just as I turned to go back inside, my phone rang again. This time, it was actually Diane with real updates on the Singapore situation. "The localization team found a workaround," she explained. "Marcus implemented it 10 minutes ago, and we're back on track. The delay won't be necessary after all." "That's excellent news," I replied, genuinely relieved. ConnectPro's expansion into Southeast Asian markets represented a major milestone for the company. "Have Marcus send me the modified documentation anyway. I'll review it tomorrow." "Will do. Sorry again for interrupting your birthday." "Actually, your timing is perfect," I said. "I'm dealing with a blast from the past who needs a reality check." After ending the call, I composed myself and returned to the dining room. As I approached our table, I could hear Craig's voice carrying above the ambient restaurant noise. "The thing about entrepreneurship is that it requires a certain mindset that most people simply don't possess," he was saying. "It's why 90% of startups fail within the first year. I've seen countless pitches from people like Megan who have ideas but lack the business acumen to execute them properly." I slid back into my seat as he continued, apparently not noticing the tight expressions on my family members' faces. "The tech world especially is brutal. You need connections, substantial capital, and a truly innovative concept, not just a rehashed idea with a new name." He took a self-satisfied sip of his wine. "That's why I advised Megan to focus on building a conventional career first. She took it personally, but I was trying to save her from inevitable disappointment." "How considerate of you," I said, my voice steady. Craig turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Important tech emergency?" "Actually, yes. Our Singapore launch was experiencing some integration issues, but the team resolved them." "Singapore?" Craig raised an eyebrow. "Your company has international clients?" "That's surprising for a support role." "Something like that," I replied vaguely. Craig seemed to interpret my ambiguity as embarrassment. His confidence visibly grew as he launched into his most pointed attack yet. "You know, I've been thinking about where things went wrong between us," he said, leaning forward. "I think the fundamental problem was that we had different definitions of success. I was focused on building real wealth and status, while you were chasing this fantasy of entrepreneurial glory." He gestured around the restaurant. Look at where my approach has gotten me. I can dine at places like this whenever I want. I have investments, property, luxury cars. What do you have to show for your stubbornness, Megan? A mid-level tech job and unrealized potential. My mother interjected, Craig, that's enough. This is Megan's birthday celebration. I'm just being honest, Mrs. Foster. Sometimes people need to hear hard truths from those who care about them. He turned back to me. The saddest part is that you could have had all this too, if you'd listened to me. We could have built something meaningful together. And what would that have been? I asked quietly. A real life, he said emphatically. A power couple with social standing. You'd have connections through me, opportunities you couldn't access on your own. Instead, you chose to struggle for independence that's led you, where, exactly? The restaurant manager appeared at our table with a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne. Ms. Foster, is this an appropriate time for your special reserve? Craig frowned at the interruption. We didn't order champagne. This is a special bottle Ms. Foster keeps at the restaurant for occasions, Robert explained smoothly. Shall I pour for everyone? Craig's expression flickered with momentary confusion. You keep champagne here? How often do you come to Elysium? I nodded to Robert. Please pour for everyone. I think this is the perfect moment. As Robert expertly opened the bottle and filled our flutes, Craig seemed to reassess me briefly before doubling down. Special reserve champagne on a tech support salary? No wonder you can't afford to live in a better neighborhood. Fiscal responsibility was never your strong suit. My brother James gripped his knife so tightly I feared it might bend. Rachel placed a calming hand on his arm. You know what your problem always was, Megan? Craig continued, warming to his theme. You never knew your limitations. You always thought you were exceptional when you were simply average. Some people just aren't meant for remarkable success, and there's no shame in that. The shame is in not recognizing your ceiling. The champagne now poured, Robert disappeared with a knowing smile. I picked up my flute and studied the bubbles rising to the surface, making my decision. I had maintained my privacy out of principle, not insecurity. But principles shouldn't enable bullying. What exactly do you consider success, Craig? I asked, my voice even. He seemed pleased by the question, as if he'd finally broken through to me. Financial freedom. Influence. Recognition. The ability to have what you want when you want it. The respect of your peers. He smirked. All the things I've achieved. Interesting definition, I said, taking a small sip of champagne. And how would you measure these things? Well, tangibly, income, investments, property. My portfolio is diversified across real estate, stocks, and private equity. I make 7 figures annually. I own a penthouse and a vacation home in the Hamptons. His eyes gleamed with self-satisfaction. Intangibly, it's about respect. When I walk into a room, people know who I am. I nodded thoughtfully. And by your definition, I'm a failure because I don't display these markers of success. I wouldn't say failure, he backpedaled slightly. Just, unfulfilled potential. Stuck in mediocrity when you could have been so much more if you'd been realistic. I placed my champagne flute down carefully. The moment had arrived. Craig, I've let you talk all evening about your definition of success while making assumptions about my life. Now it's my turn to speak. Something in my tone must have caught his attention because he sat back, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face for the first time. You've spent this entire dinner belittling my career and life choices based on absolutely no current information about what I do, I continued calmly. You've assumed I'm in a low-level tech support position because that fits your narrative of me as a failed entrepreneur. I reached for my phone and opened my email, finding the files Jessica had just sent. Let me update you on what actually happened with my little app idea after we broke up. I turned my phone screen toward Craig, displaying the Forbes digital magazine cover with my photo and the headline, Megan Foster, How She Built ConnectPro into a $2.1 billion platform. ConnectPro launched 4 years ago after 18 months of development, I explained, my voice steady and professional. We received initial funding of $500,000 from Right Ventures, followed by a Series A round of $7 million 6 months later. Craig's expression froze somewhere between disbelief and shock as I continued. The platform currently has over 12 million users worldwide and connects freelancers with businesses in 27 countries. We employ 84 people full-time at our headquarters in Boston, plus another 43 remote employees internationally. I swiped to the next document, our most recent valuation report. Last month, we closed our Series C funding round at $150 million, valuing the company at just over $2.1 billion. I retained majority ownership through all funding rounds, which means my personal net worth is approximately $1.4 billion on paper. Craig's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand supportively. The tech emergency I was handling? That was our Singapore office preparing for our Southeast Asian market expansion launching next week. I wasn't speaking to tech support, I was speaking to my chief operations officer because I'm the founder and CEO. I let this sink in for a moment. Around us, the restaurant continued its elegant dinner service, unaware of the dramatic revelation unfolding at our table. A waiter discreetly refreshed our water glasses. I don't normally discuss my financial situation, I continued. I've found that wealth tends to change how people treat you, rarely for the better. I prefer to be valued for my ideas and character rather than my bank account. Craig finally found his voice, though it came out strained. You're the CEO of ConnectPro? The ConnectPro? The very same. But that's impossible, he sputtered. ConnectPro is everywhere. Their billboard is visible from my office window. They're revolutionizing the gig economy. I corrected gently. We're revolutionizing the gig economy. I don't understand, Craig said, visibly struggling to reconcile the Megan he'd been patronizing all evening with this new reality. Why didn't you say anything when I was offering to help your career? Would you have believed me if I had? I asked. Or would you have accused me of exaggerating? His silence was answer enough. Besides, I continued, I was curious how far you'd go with your assumptions. You see, success hasn't just taught me about business, Craig. It's taught me about people. Those who truly care about others celebrate their achievements rather than diminishing them. I signaled to Robert, who had been waiting attentively nearby. He approached with a knowing smile. Is everything to your satisfaction, Ms. Foster? He asked. Perfect as always, Robert. I believe we're ready for that special dessert now. Right away, he replied with a slight bow before departing. You know the manager by name, Craig observed numbly. Robert isn't the manager, I explained. He's the owner. And I don't just know him by name because I'm a regular customer. James couldn't suppress his grin any longer. She's being modest. Tell him, Meg. I sighed, somewhat embarrassed by the attention. I'm a silent partner in Elysium. I provided the capital for Robert to expand from his original location to this waterfront property 2 years ago. Craig's complexion had paled considerably. You own this restaurant? Partially. I own minority stakes in several local businesses. I believe in reinvesting in the community. But you never mentioned. Craig trailed off, seemingly unable to complete the thought. Why would I? We haven't spoken in 6 years. And even when we were together, you showed no interest in my business aspirations except to criticize them. Robert returned with a team of servers bearing a spectacular dessert presentation, an elaborate chocolate sculpture surrounded by an assortment of petit fours and a birthday message written in gold leaf. Happy birthday from all of us at Elysium, Robert announced as the servers placed the creation on our table. Several nearby diners applauded appreciatively. Thank you, Robert. It's beautiful, I said sincerely. As the servers departed, Craig attempted to regain his composure. I don't know what to say. Congratulations on your success. It's impressive. Thank you, I replied simply. I suppose I underestimated your potential, he added, the statement falling somewhere between an admission and a further insult. You did, I agreed. But in fairness, so did several venture capital firms who rejected my initial pitches. The difference is they weren't claiming to care about me while tearing down my confidence. Craig winced. I was trying to be realistic. No, I corrected him. You were projecting your own limitations onto me. You couldn't envision building something from nothing, so you assumed I couldn't either. I watched as realization dawned across his features. The Singapore call, you weren't exaggerating the importance of your position. No, I wasn't. ConnectPro is launching in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines simultaneously next week. It represents about $30 million in projected first-year revenue for those markets alone. Craig took a large gulp of his champagne, seemingly trying to process this new reality. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, car arriving in 5 minutes. You mentioned earlier that you judge success partly by tangible assets, I said, standing up. Would you all excuse me for a moment? I have something to show you outside. My family, already aware of what was coming, exchanged amused glances as we all rose from the table. Craig followed in stunned silence as I led the group through the restaurant toward the entrance. Outside, the night had fully descended, and the harbor lights twinkled across the water. The cool evening air carried the scent of salt and distant rain. As we reached the valet stand, a sleek, midnight blue McLaren 720S pulled up with a gentle purr of its engine. Thomas, my driver, emerged and handed me the keys with a discreet nod. Your car, Miss Foster. I brought it as requested. Craig's eyes widened to comical proportions. This is yours? One of them, I replied, running my hand along the car's smooth contour. I have a small collection. The Aston Martin is probably my favorite for everyday driving, but the McLaren is special for occasions. I turned to face Craig directly. You mentioned property as another measure of success. I live in Brookline, in a 7-bedroom historic home on 3 acres. I also have a beach house on Nantucket and a small villa in Tuscany that I purchased last year. Craig stared at the McLaren, then back at me, visibly struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the one he thought he knew. I don't flaunt these things, I continued, because I've learned that true wealth isn't about impressing others. It's about the freedom to make choices aligned with your values. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening my photo gallery. These are recent pictures of my home, if you're interested. Craig took the phone with unsteady hands, scrolling through images of my tastefully renovated historic mansion, its sprawling gardens, and the infinity pool overlooking the property's wooded area. This is incredible, he muttered. Thank you. The renovation took 18 months, but I'm pleased with the results. Craig handed back my phone, his earlier smugness entirely evaporated. I had no idea. All this time, I thought. You thought what you wanted to think, I finished for him. That I had failed because I didn't follow your path. That my rejection of your guidance led to struggle rather than success. A light breeze ruffled his perfectly styled hair as he stood there, diminished by the reality of my accomplishments. I suppose I should apologize, he said finally, though his tone suggested the words cost him considerable effort. That's not necessary, I replied. Your opinion stopped mattering to me years ago. In fact, your discouragement became one of my greatest motivators. Every time an investor rejected me or a technical challenge seemed insurmountable, I remembered your certainty that I would fail, and found renewed determination to prove you wrong. Craig straightened his tie, attempting to salvage some dignity. Well, it seems you've done exactly that. Perhaps we should reconnect professionally. My firm handles investments for several high-net-worth individuals who might be interested in your next venture. The transparent attempt to align himself with my success after an evening of belittlement was almost laughable. My brother James actually did laugh, earning a sharp glance from Craig. I appreciate the offer, I said diplomatically, but I'm quite satisfied with my current financial advisors. Craig nodded, trying to appear unfazed by the rejection. Of course. But my offer stands if you change your mind. Successful people should stick together. Is that what we are now? Equals? I asked, genuinely curious about his sudden change in perspective. He hesitated before answering, revealing the truth even as he tried to hide it. Absolutely. Your achievements speak for themselves. Interesting, I mused. An hour ago, I was an unremarkable tech support employee with unrealistic ambitions. Now that you know my net worth, suddenly I'm worth knowing. Craig flushed. That's not fair. I'm simply acknowledging your success. No, I corrected him. You're acknowledging my wealth. There's a difference. I glanced at my family, who stood watching this exchange with varying expressions of satisfaction. Shall we return inside? I believe we still have that beautiful dessert waiting. As we turned to re-enter the restaurant, a group of diners exiting the Elysium paused to admire the McLaren. One of them recognized me. Miss Foster? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that ConnectPro transformed our small business. We've been able to find specialized talent we never could have accessed otherwise. Thank you for creating such an amazing platform. I smiled, genuinely touched by the unexpected testimonial. Thank you for sharing that. Stories like yours are why we do what we do. As the group continued on their way, I caught Craig's stunned expression. This spontaneous encounter had confirmed my success in a way my words alone could not. Shall we? I gestured toward the restaurant door. Craig nodded mutely, his entire worldview visibly shaken. As we walked back to our table, I felt no triumph or vindication, only a quiet satisfaction that the truth had finally come to light. We returned to our table where the elaborate dessert presentation awaited, the chocolate sculpture still intact and petit fours artfully arranged. Several nearby diners glanced our way with curious expressions, likely wondering about the McLaren outside and our brief exit. Robert approached as we settled back into our seats. Miss Foster, would you prefer the champagne service now or after dessert? Craig looked confused. We already have champagne. Robert smiled politely. Miss Foster has a tradition of sharing Cristal Rose with the entire restaurant on special occasions. I nodded. Let's do it now, Robert. Thank you. Very good, he replied, signaling to his staff who began moving efficiently around the dining room. Craig watched in astonishment as servers approached each table with champagne flutes and bottles of Cristal Rose. You're buying champagne for the entire restaurant? He asked incredulously. It's become something of a birthday tradition, I explained. Success means little if not shared. Robert returned to our table with a microphone. Miss Foster, would you like to make your usual toast? I stood and accepted the microphone, addressing the now attentive restaurant. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Megan Foster, and today I'm celebrating my 32nd birthday with family and friends. Each year, I'm reminded of how fortunate I've been, and I believe good fortune should be shared. Please enjoy a glass of champagne on me, and remember to pursue your dreams relentlessly, even when others doubt you. Especially then. Applause rippled through the restaurant as I returned the microphone to Robert and sat down. Several patrons raised their glasses in my direction with appreciative smiles. Craig leaned forward, his voice low. You do this every year? At different restaurants around the city, I confirmed. It's my way of celebrating milestones while supporting local businesses. It must cost thousands, he remarked. Around 15,000 tonight, I said with a shrug. A small price for creating a memorable experience for everyone here. Craig's expression shifted from shocked to calculating. I could practically see his mind reassessing everything he thought he knew about me. Megan, I feel terrible about my behavior earlier, he said, his tone suddenly warm and conciliatory. You've clearly achieved extraordinary success, far beyond what most entrepreneurs ever accomplish. I should have been more supportive when we were together. My mother barely suppressed an eye roll at his transparent pivot. James coughed to hide his laughter. It's water under the bridge, I replied neutrally. We've both moved on. Have we? Craig asked, leaning closer. Some connections are worth revisiting, don't you think? Especially between two successful people who understand each other's worlds. I raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting what I think you are? I'm simply saying we should consider reconnecting. Professionally at first, perhaps, but who knows where things might lead. He smiled what he clearly thought was his most charming smile. We always had chemistry, Megan. And now that you've built this impressive empire, we'd be equals in a relationship. No more misunderstandings about potential and capability. I took a deliberate sip of champagne before responding. So, now that I'm wealthy and influential, you find me dateable again? He winced slightly. That's not what I meant. I always found you attractive and intelligent. I just didn't understand your vision. And now? Now I see that you were extraordinary all along. I was wrong to doubt you. I studied him for a moment, noting how his posture had changed, how he leaned toward me with eager attention, the same man who hours earlier had dismissed my entire life as mediocre. Craig, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm afraid I must decline. I've learned to value people who believe in me when it's difficult, not just when it's convenient or advantageous. His smile faltered. I understand your hesitation, but people grow and change. I've matured since our relationship. Have you? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm sitting, you're still measuring people's worth by their financial status and possessions. The only difference is that now you've reassessed my value based on new information. Craig flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? You spent the entire evening belittling me when you thought I was an ordinary tech employee. Your behavior changed only when you learned about my wealth and status. My brother James couldn't contain himself any longer. Dude, she's right. You were being a complete jerk until you saw the McLaren. Craig shot James an annoyed look before turning back to me. Look, Megan, I admit I made assumptions. But can you blame me? You deliberately hid your success. You showed up in an understated outfit, no designer labels, minimal jewelry. You were being misleading. I wasn't misleading anyone, I replied calmly. I was being myself. My worth isn't in my labels or possessions. The fact that you equate simplicity with failure says more about you than it does about me. Robert approached our table again. Ms. Foster, several guests have asked if they might speak with you briefly. Would you like me to arrange that now or after your meal? Now is fine, Robert. Thank you. A small group of diners approached our table, including a middle-aged couple and their college-aged daughter. Ms. Foster, I'm sorry to interrupt your birthday dinner, the woman began. I'm Ellen Nichols. My daughter Jessica uses ConnectPro to find graphic design work while she's in college. It's helped her pay her tuition and build a professional portfolio. We just wanted to thank you personally. The daughter nodded enthusiastically. I've made over $20,000 this year through the platform. It's literally changing my life. I stood to shake their hands. That's exactly why I created ConnectPro. Thank you for sharing your story with me. After a brief conversation, they returned to their table, and I sat down to find Craig watching me with a mixture of awe and frustration. You're somewhat of a celebrity, he observed. In certain circles, I acknowledged. Though I prefer to focus on the impact of the platform rather than personal recognition. The evening continued with a striking role reversal. Craig, once dominating the conversation with stories of his success, now sat quietly as I fielded occasional visits from admirers and maintained easy conversation with my family. His attempts to insert himself into discussions about my business ventures fell flat, his knowledge of tech startups superficial compared to my lived experience. As we finished dessert, I checked my watch and signaled for the bill. Please, allow me, Craig said quickly, reaching for his wallet. It's the least I can do. That's not necessary, I replied. The evening is already taken care of. I insist, he pressed. A small gesture to apologize for my behavior. Robert approached with a discreet smile. There's no bill tonight, Mr. Hamilton. Ms. Foster has a standing arrangement with us. Craig's hand fell away from his wallet. Standing arrangement? As I mentioned, I'm a partner in the restaurant, I explained. My meals here are accounted for differently. Craig nodded slowly, processing yet another reminder of my financial position. Of course. As we prepared to leave, Craig made one final attempt. Megan, I'd really like the opportunity to make up for my behavior tonight. Perhaps dinner next week? I know an excellent place in Beacon Hill. I regarded him thoughtfully. Craig, I appreciate the offer, but I must decline. Not because I hold a grudge, but because I've realized something important tonight. What's that? True connections aren't built on status or achievements. They're built on mutual respect, support, and shared values. We fundamentally disagree on what matters in life. His face fell. Is it really that simple for you? To dismiss years of history between us? The history you're referring to included you systematically undermining my confidence and dreams, I reminded him. That's not a foundation I'm interested in rebuilding upon. Outside the restaurant, Thomas had brought the McLaren back around. My family embraced me with birthday wishes and departed in their own vehicles, while Craig stood awkwardly to the side. Can I at least offer you a ride home? He asked, gesturing to his BMW parked nearby. I smiled politely. Thank you, but I'll drive myself tonight. The McLaren doesn't get out often enough. As I settled into the driver's seat, Craig approached the window. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry, Megan. And I'm genuinely impressed by what you've accomplished. I looked up at him, seeing clearly for the first time the insecurity behind his bravado. I hope you find what you're looking for, Craig. Success is about more than acquisitions and status. The sooner you realize that, the happier you'll be. Without waiting for his response, I started the engine, feeling the powerful machine hum to life beneath me. As I pulled away from the restaurant, I glanced in the rearview mirror to see Craig standing alone on the curb, watching the McLaren disappear into the night, a fitting metaphor for the opportunities he'd lost through his own arrogance. The drive home from Elysium gave me time to process the evening's events. The McLaren handled the winding roads of Brookline with precision as I navigated toward my property, street lamps casting intermittent golden light across the dashboard. For the first time in years, I felt completely free of Craig's lingering influence, the last vestiges of self-doubt that had occasionally surfaced despite my success. My home appeared ahead, its stone facade and meticulously landscaped grounds illuminated by subtle lighting. The security gate swung open automatically as I approached, and I guided the McLaren up the circular driveway. The three-story historic mansion stood as a testament to my journey, not as a status symbol, but as a sanctuary I had created for myself. Martha, my housekeeper, greeted me at the door. Happy birthday, Miss Foster. Did you have a nice evening with your family? It was illuminating, I replied with a smile. Is Benjamin still awake? Yes, he's in the kitchen. He insisted on waiting up for you. I made my way through the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and into the warm, inviting kitchen at the back of the house. Despite the home's grandeur, the kitchen remained my favorite space, designed to be functional and comfortable rather than ostentatious. Benjamin, my personal chef and nutritionist, stood at the island counter putting the finishing touches on a small cake. At 72, he had become more like family than staff since I hired him 3 years ago. There she is, he announced, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. I know you had dessert at the restaurant, but birthday traditions are sacred. The cake was simple but elegant, dark chocolate with fresh raspberries, my favorite combination. It's perfect, Benjamin, thank you, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. How was dinner? Did your family enjoy themselves? I settled onto a stool at the counter. My family did. There was an unexpected guest who made things complicated. Ah, Benjamin nodded knowingly. The ex-boyfriend you mentioned this morning? The very same. He spent the evening belittling my career until he discovered who I actually am. Benjamin shook his head as he cut a small slice of cake. Some people never see beyond their own assumptions. I assume his attitude changed once he knew the truth. Dramatically, I confirmed. Suddenly he wanted to reconnect, both professionally and personally. And you declined, I hope? Of course. Some bridges are better left burned. Benjamin placed the cake slice before me with a flourish. A wise decision. Success reveals people's true characters, both those who achieve it and those who encounter it in others. We chatted for a few more minutes before Benjamin wished me goodnight and retired to his cottage on the property. Left alone in the kitchen, I savored the quiet moment and reflected on how far I'd come. My mother called as I was heading upstairs. "Just checking that you're okay, sweetheart," she said. That was quite an evening. "I'm fine, Mom." Better than fine, actually. Seeing Craig again made me realize I've truly moved on. "He looked absolutely thunderstruck when you showed him the car," she chuckled. "James said Craig tried to approach him at the valet stand after you left, asking more questions about your company." I laughed softly. "Some people never change." "But you have," my mother said, her voice warm with pride. "Not just the success, Megan. The way you handled yourself tonight, with grace and dignity rather than spite. That's the real achievement." After saying goodnight to my mother, I made my way to my home office. Unlike the rest of the house, which I had professionally decorated, this space contained personal touches that told the story of my journey. My first business plan for ConnectPro, framed on the wall, a photo of the tiny apartment where I'd coded the initial prototype, the rejection letters from investors who had passed on the opportunity, which I'd kept as motivation. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, checking the final preparations for the Singapore launch. Everything was on track. The team had resolved the localization issues, and the marketing campaign was set to begin in 3 days. By this time next week, ConnectPro would be connecting freelancers and businesses across Southeast Asia, creating economic opportunities for thousands of people. This was the success that mattered to me, not the cars or the house or the restaurant champagne, but the impact. Each new market meant more individuals empowered to build careers on their own terms, more small businesses accessing talent they couldn't otherwise afford, more flexibility for parents, students, and caregivers to earn income while managing their other responsibilities. I thought back to Craig's definition of success: financial freedom, influence, recognition, respect. He wasn't entirely wrong, these were valuable outcomes. But his view was incomplete. True success included purpose, integrity, and positive impact. Without these elements, the external trappings became hollow symbols rather than meaningful achievements. My phone chimed with a text from Rachel, my sister-in-law. "You handled tonight beautifully. James is still laughing about Craig's face when you mentioned the Aston Martin collection." I smiled, appreciating her support but also feeling a tinge of compassion for Craig. His desperate attempts to align himself with my success revealed his own insecurities. In some ways, despite his wealth and status, he seemed trapped in a perpetual cycle of seeking validation through external markers of achievement. The following morning, I woke early for my usual routine, a 5-mile run around the property, followed by 30 minutes of meditation. By 8 o'clock, I was dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, ready to head to the ConnectPro office. As I walked through my spacious closet, I passed the section containing designer dresses and accessories I rarely wore. I had purchased them for specific events, industry galas, investor meetings, the occasional awards ceremony, but my daily wardrobe remained deliberately understated. I preferred to be judged by my ideas and actions rather than my appearance. I chose to drive the inconspicuous Audi rather than one of the luxury sports cars. The McLaren had served its purpose the previous night, but it wasn't my everyday style. Authenticity mattered more to me than flaunting wealth. At the ConnectPro headquarters in downtown Boston, I was greeted by Jessica, who handed me a coffee and a knowing smile. "So? How did it go with the ex?" "Exactly as expected," I replied. Complete shock, followed by transparent attempts to insert himself into my success. Jessica laughed. "I wish I could have seen his face." "Any regrets about revealing your true situation?" I considered this as we walked toward my office. No regrets. But it did remind me why I usually keep a low profile. People treat you differently when they know your net worth. My office was intentionally modest, functional and comfortable but not ostentatious. I had insisted the engineering team have the corner office with the best views, a decision that had raised eyebrows among some board members but had earned me loyalty from the technical staff who formed the backbone of our company. The morning was filled with meetings about the Singapore launch and a video conference with our new team in Manila. Around noon, Jessica appeared at my door again. "There's an article about you in Boston Business Journal. Apparently, someone from Elysium last night works for them." She handed me her tablet, open to an article titled "Tech Billionaire Megan Foster's Birthday Surprise, Champagne for Entire Restaurant." I skimmed the piece, which focused more on the champagne gesture than on my company's achievements or upcoming expansion. It was exactly the kind of surface-level coverage I typically avoided. "This is why I prefer to fly under the radar," I said, handing the tablet back. "The focus should be on ConnectPro's impact, not on what kind of car I drive or how much I spend on champagne." "Speaking of which," Jessica said, hesitating slightly, "Craig Hamilton called the office this morning. 3 times. He wanted to schedule a meeting with you about potential synergies between his investment firm and ConnectPro." I couldn't help but laugh. Some people never quit. "What did you tell him?" "That you're fully booked for the next 6 months, but he's welcome to speak with our business development team if he has a specific proposal." Perfect response, I approved. "Thank you." The afternoon included a mentoring session with young female entrepreneurs from a local business incubator. This monthly commitment remained one of my favorite activities, sharing knowledge and encouragement with women facing the same challenges and doubts I had encountered years earlier. Today's session felt particularly meaningful after the previous night's confrontation with Craig. As I listened to these ambitious women describe their business ideas and obstacles, I found myself sharing more personal stories than usual. The hardest part wasn't developing the technology or securing funding, I told them. It was believing in myself when the most important people in my life didn't. "You'll face plenty of rejection from investors and potential clients, that's just business. But when someone you trust tells you you're not capable, that cuts deeper." "How did you overcome that?" asked one participant, a young woman developing an educational app. "By recognizing that other people's limitations aren't your own," I replied. Sometimes people discourage you because they genuinely can't envision what you're trying to build. Their skepticism says more about their imagination than your potential. After the mentoring session, I spent time reviewing applications for ConnectPro's scholarship program, which funded education for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. We had expanded the program to support 50 students this year, up from 20 the previous year. As evening approached, I walked through the office, checking in with team members still working on the Singapore launch. Our culture encouraged work-life balance, but major launches inevitably required extra hours. I made sure to personally thank each person, remembering names and specific contributions. Returning home, I changed into comfortable clothes and took a glass of wine out to the terrace overlooking the gardens. The evening was cool but pleasant, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. In moments like this, I felt the deepest gratitude for my journey, not for the material trappings, but for the freedom to create, to make an impact, and to live authentically. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Megan, it's Craig. Got your number from a mutual connection. I wanted to apologize again for my behavior and see if you'd reconsider meeting. I have some investment opportunities that could benefit ConnectPro." I stared at the message, marveling at his persistence and tone deafness. After a moment's consideration, I responded simply. "Craig, I wish you well in your endeavors, but I must decline. Our paths have diverged too significantly to realign now. Please respect my decision." Blocking his number afterward felt like closing the final chapter of an old story. Craig had been both a painful lesson and an unexpected catalyst in my journey. His doubt had fueled my determination, and for that, I could actually be grateful. Later that evening, I sat in my home library reviewing plans for ConnectPro's next phase of development, a specialized platform for creative professionals that would launch in early 2026. As I made notes and considered potential challenges, I reflected on the true meaning of success. Success wasn't about proving Craig or anyone else wrong. It wasn't about accumulating wealth or possessions. It wasn't even about building a billion-dollar company. True success was about creating value, living with integrity, and maintaining the freedom to define my own path. The journey had taught me that authentic success comes from within, from knowing your worth even when others don't see it, from pursuing your vision even when the path isn't clear, and from staying true to your values even when success gives you the option not to. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I felt profound peace. The confrontation with Craig had been uncomfortable but ultimately liberating. His presence had been the final test, proof that I had not only achieved external success but had developed the inner strength to remain grounded in my own definition of achievement. In the end, the greatest luxury wasn't the mansion or the cars or the financial freedom, it was the ability to live authentically and to create positive change in the world. That was a success no one could diminish, not even Craig. What does success mean to you? Is it measured by material possessions, meaningful relationships, personal growth, or impact on others? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share with someone who might need a reminder that the opinions of others don't define your potential. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, the most important validation comes from within. Your dreams are valid, your vision matters, and your unique path to success is worth pursuing.